Hey everyone, today I am doing another tier list. This time I am doing it for the Sage class. Sage only has 5 heroes in it, so it's one of the smallest ones in the game. Sages in this game are the most support and buff oriented class overall, I think. They sort of are the more stereotypical support. They do have a little bit of healing, but that's not the main support they provide, is more through buffs. A lot of the other classes are either damage oriented or debuff in the form of their supports or other types of utility. So, due to the sort of role they fill, sages in general are all extremely strong, and you can pretty much put them in any team comp and they will be able to benefit in some way. From a just more objective perspective, all of them could probably go in A tier or better just because Inspire and Bless, the two sort of hallmark abilities they have, are just so good and get so much use. But obviously, just putting them all in A tier is going to be boring and doesn't really help anyone figure out which sages they should be using because there is differences between them. Some of them are definitely stronger than other ones or play in different ways, so I'll definitely go over that. So the scale I'm going to set here, because they're just so universally good, is this. S tier, this is basically a sage that just is able to do so much on their own that the amount of support they can provide just really makes them stand out amongst the others to just some sort of like crazy degree. A tier is just going to be a sage that's just really strong, no complaints. You're going to be using them a lot of the time. They're not quite as good as the S tier sages where you maybe probably are using them all the time if you choose to keep them around. But I do know certain parties run 2 sages, so in that case, if you have one of the S tiers, you're probably not going to have both. But if you have one of the S tiers, you would definitely pick one of these A tiers to be your second sage. B tier is just sort of what you'd expect from a average sage. That's a little vague, but basically they're good because they're still a sage, but admittedly they're just a little niche. There's some things to their skill tree that, while maybe fun, they're not bad. There's just definitely better options. And then C tier is the sage that you're really only going to pick if you have no other sages. They're pretty much just power crept by the other ones, and you'll kind of see what I mean by all of this as I go through the list. The first sage is going to be Lady Guinevere, and she's the only sage that you can get in every single run as you unlock her through the story. And for a lot of players, she's actually going to be the first sage that you'll have and use. And she'll be a temporary party member, so you can kind of get a little taste of what she has in store for you. And this is when a lot of players realize, wow, Inspire? Really, really good. What Guinevere has, though, on top of the other sages, is Teleport. And this is huge. Teleport is one of the strongest abilities in the game. It has unparalleled mobility, and the ability for her to get into action or out of action with this teleport is extremely strong. Using it defensively, if you're trying to protect your sage, great. But also, because of Teleport, this does enable her to have a sort of additional playstyle that the other sages don't get. She has a sort of assassin playstyle, especially if you take the Shadow Gate talent on the teleport skill, which would then put her in the hidden condition after she's teleported, which means she can get surprise attack, at least on one hit. And she can also teleport in, get to a backline enemy, and then use freezing attack. Teleport just enables a lot for her that just can't really be matched by a lot of the other sages. And because of that, I'm going to put her in S tier. For most people, this is usually the sage that they're going to stick to for their playthrough. And it's not hard to see why. She's very solid. The second sage is going to be Lady Isolde. She's a bit of a secret character because you need to keep Sir Tristan around into Act 2. He goes on an event, brings her back, and then you need to use a resurrection token on her. There's a lot more steps to acquiring her compared to like any other hero in the game. But she's a very solid sage if you keep Tristan around and aren't immediately put off by his weak state upon introduction. What I like about her is she has a bit of debuff and a bit of buffing. Most sages, their only real debuff is freezing attack, And some of them have Ice Wall, which is really good, but not really a debuff. She has Freezing Attack, but she also has Ice Lance, which is a really strong ranged attack, which can also freeze, which is really good. She has an Ice Aura, which can chill enemies around her. So she just has a good amount of debuffing with also keeping the classical buffing Sage abilities. So because of this, I think she's one of the strongest Sages. However, I don't think she's quite S tier. That teleport really does a lot for Guinevere. I think Isolde falls just short of S tier and ends up in A. I like the diversity she sort of has compared to some of the other sages, but it isn't quite on the same level as Guinevere and one other sage I'm going to get to later. Up next is Sir Leodegrance. He's a rightful alignment locked hero, so you'll only get him if you do the rightful alignment. And you can get him fairly early on, earlier than Guinevere, I believe. So having a sage that early is actually really good, especially if you like sages. Unfortunately, he's going to be our C tier sage. He's not bad because he's a sage, but compared to the others, he just really falls short. There's nothing that makes him stand out compared to them. He's kind of the vanilla sage. He's directly power crept by Isolde. Like, they have the exact same abilities, but then she has extra ones on top of it. And then, compared to Guinevere, it's almost the same case. He has, like, Master of Ice, where she has Scout or something like that, if I'm remembering correctly. But then she also has Teleport. I think he maybe has Wall of Ice versus her Ray of Light. But the Teleport is just much more valuable. It opens up an entire new playstyle for her, and there's only one way to play him. And there's just other sages that can play that better. So he's good early game, but you'll find yourself replacing him in pretty much every single run if you're using a sage. It's a shame too, because he looks pretty cool. I like the helmet, and he has a decent Grandmaster of the Round Table ability if you assign him there. Our next sage is going to be Sir Lucan, who's actually a personal favorite of mine. I really like him. He has a very unique skill tree built up. He has Dash. It's not quite as good as Teleport, but it's still a mobility move, which is great. He does not have Wall of Ice, and he does not have Freezing Attack, so he's a lot lower in terms of control abilities compared to the other sages. And he's stacked up much more as sort of a melee damage dealer / off tank. He has the Monster Slayer talent, which grants him extra damage. He has Cleansing Fire, and he has magical armor, so he gets a huge amount of armor that will protect him for up to 2 hits, making him very tanky for those 2 hits. And he can actually get the highest amount of armor in the entire game if you want to play around and meme a little bit. He's nothing amazing, but he has a very unique playstyle to him that I do personally like. I find some charm to it. It's fun, it's entertaining, and it's also not bad. I've actually gotten some good results out of him in terms of making him a more aggressive, tanky-ish, damage-dealing sage. So because of that, I'm going to put him into B. I think he is better than Leodegrance just because he's much more unique and actually has something to offer that other sages don't. Lastly, there is Lady Morgawse, Mordred's mom. And honestly, she's probably my favorite sage in the entire game, and this may be my bias speaking, but I do think she is an S tier sage. It's hard to say whether she's the best in the game compared to like Guinevere, for example. I think it ultimately comes down to playstyle preference, because Morgawse is completely different from all of the rest of the sages. She kind of plays more like an Arcanist due to all of the spells and range spells she's going to be throwing out. Her kit is just completely loaded. She's one of the strongest debuffing heroes in the game and has some of the highest capability of debuffing enemies as a solo unit because she has chills and she has shocks. Stacking them on a single target can completely annihilate all of their AP. I've had her lock down multiple enemies completely solo before, which is not something that can be said for a lot of heroes in this game. She has Ice Plates, which is just great survivability. Chain Lightning, one of the best abilities in the game. Thunderbolt, another extremely strong ability. Wall of Ice, also really strong. She keeps freezing attack. She has Master of Ice and Master of Lightning, so she can do really good range damage with her lightning spells. Her damage does stand out, I think, amongst the sages. She just has so much. You're losing Inspire and you're losing Bless, and I can understand why some players wouldn't want to give that up. But if you're going into the Old Faith Tyrant alignment, which is what her alignment is, you're not using any sages really anyways due to the alignment conflicts, and she synergizes extremely strong with that specific type of alignment. She synergizes just in general with Old Faith, but if you're doing Old Faith Tyrant or even Christian Tyrant to some degree, just she can work really well, I guess, with just a lot of teams. One alignment in particular, she shines more so, but just really good. And that wraps up the tiering of the sages. I'm actually really confident in these placements. There's none where I'm like, maybe they could go lower, maybe they could go higher. This is pretty solid, I think. If you have any disagreements, let me know. I'm curious what some of your takes are on some of these characters. I feel like some people may disagree with me on the Morgawse one, but, that's okay. This was fun to rank them. Sages are a great class. You'll get use out of pretty much any of these if you choose to use them. I only have a couple more classes to go, and then I actually plan to do just a tier list for all the characters all together. So that's it for this one, and as always, thanks for watching.